Please be seated. The court is now back in session. Before I hand the floor to the prosecutor to continue putting questions to this civil party, the chamber will now rule on the request by Nguyen Chi. Upon having the request by Nguyen Chi through his defense counsel to follow the proceedings through a remote means for the remainder of the day, due to his health reason, that is lumbago, headache, and that he cannot concentrate in the courtroom. The request is backed by the medical report by the treating doctor of Mr. Nguyen Chi, another accused at the ECCC detention facility. He observes that Nguyen Chi has a headache, has a backache and high blood pressure, and recommends that the chamber shall allow him to follow the proceeding through a remote means. The request by Nguyen Chi is reasoned so that the chamber decides to grant him the request so that he can be allowed to follow the proceedings from a holding cell downstairs from today until the conclusion of this afternoon's session. The chamber requires the defense team to deliver the waiver from Nguyen Chi immediately, and the AV unit you instructed to link the proceeding to the holding cell downstairs so that Nguyen Chi can follow it. That applies for the remainder of today's proceeding. Security guards you instructed to take Mr. Nguyen Chi to the room downstairs so that he can follow the proceedings. The floor is now given to the prosecutor. You have 10 more minutes.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will share these 10 minutes with my colleague. You said earlier and last week, Mr. Miasaran, that you had seen two bodies on the left-hand side of the Monivong Bridge before you crossed it. Were you sufficiently close to these bodies to see if these bodies were wearing civilian clothes or army clothes?
The two bodies on the left side of the Monivong Bridge were dressed in civilian clothes. They did not dress in the army uniform. And they were both male.
And since you were a nurse, and since you were used to seeing injured people or even bodies, so according to what you saw, could you see, were there any traces of bullets or any other element that might have given you an idea of why these people had died?
The bodies that I saw on the left side of the Monuvong Bridge. They were not placed on the ground properly. They were kind of in an awkward position. So I could not say for sure that I had to go there and see whether they died because of the bullets or not.
I would like to quote now from your application D22-118, that is to say, and this is a very short sentence in Khmer. It's on page 4, ERN 0036 21 76 00362176. In English, it's on page 3, 00362196, and in French, it's on page 3, 00362204. And here you are speaking about the moment when you left Phnom Penh and when you are traveling to Sisopon during your long journey, and you said that along the road I saw many, many dead people, and I did not know why they had died. End of quote. So why are you saying that these people died without reason?
I stated that people died because I saw them died near the bridge, and along the road that I traveled, I did not see any dead bodies along the road. I only saw people who were traveling with me were taken away.
D'accord, merci.
Thank you. Thank you for this clarification. I have one last question to put to you. You told us last week that your wife, who was with your child, had spent the night on Pasteur Street with relatives, so that she would not be all alone. And later on, did you get any news from these relatives? And second question, were these relatives, or did these relatives say anything about what had happened to your wife, if you saw your relatives again?
I did not actually reach the house where my wife was staying on Pasteur Road, so I did not meet her nor any other members of the families. In fact, there were other families living in that house, and I did not meet any of them until the present time. I have not received any further news from them until now.
Et donc, est-ce qu'après...
So after 1979, did you get any kind of information about the fate of your wife during the evacuation? You never heard anything about what had happened to her in one way or the other?
Since that day, that is the day that I left, I have not received any news. That is, from that year until today, I did not know about the fate of my wife. Even if she hates to crawl home, she would have reached home by now.
Thank you, Mr. Miasarar. I will now give the floor to my colleague for the few remaining questions. Thank you.
Chandra Rasmay. Good morning, Mr. President, Your Honors. Good morning, everyone in and around the courtroom. Good morning, Mr. Misaran. My name is Chandra Rasmay. I am the Deputy Co-Prosecutor. I only have 6 remaining questions in addition to what have been asked by my colleague. You just stated that when you reached your house, you only took the necklace, your wife's shirt, and the aspirin tablets. My question is, why did you bring the aspirin tablets with you? Subhapati, please repeat your question. You said that you reached your house and you did not see your wife, so you only take your wife's shirt, gold, and the aspirin tablets. My question is, why did you have to bring the aspirin tablets along? Response. In my house, I believe that the aspirin tablets could be used when I traveled. So I just decided that I had to take it along. And that tablets were close to hand, so I simply brought it along. Question. When people were evacuated from Phnom Penh, did you see any other people protesting against the evacuation by the Khmer Rouge? Or did you yourself protest against the evacuation by the Khmer Rouge soldiers? Response. When I left, the Khmer Rouge who were on the road, either traveling or walking, did not communicate with us, nor they instruct us what to do. We had to leave because we were asked to do so. And could you please repeat your question again, as I am not 100% sure? Prosecutor, when there was an order for the Phnom Penh residents to leave, did any of the people protest against such order? Or did you personally protest against such order, or if you asked for any reason for such order? Response. At that time, I did not see anyone who protested against the order. I myself, I did not do it. And I was scared as well. So I did not see anyone protested against the order. Thank you. Question. You also said when you were placed in a temporary location, there was an exchange of food with the medicine that you had. What would happen if you were caught by Angkar during such a transaction? Or were such exchange allowed by Angkar? Response. I could not know whether there would be discipline imposed by Angkar. However, when we already left Paal, there were some other people looking for gasoline or looking for lighters. And at that time, I had the gasoline. So I exchanged it with those people, and those 6 or 7 people, they were kind of vigilant and careful, and after the exchange, they left. Thank you. This is my fourth question. When the Khmer Rouge arrived at the hospital where you work, did you hear them talking through the medical staff or to yourself about the evacuation or about anything else? Response: I did not receive any order from the Khmer Rouge soldiers to leave. However, the people from the back on the floor and those from other blocks were said that they were asked to leave by the Khmer Rouge soldiers. Questions. Besides that, did the Khmer Rouge say anything else? Response: I did not know whether they spoke about anything else, as I did not have any contact with the Khmer Rouge soldiers. I also saw the Khmer Rouge soldiers on the street, but they did not speak to us. Thank you. This is my fifth question. What were the reasons that caused you or other people to believe the Khmer Rouge soldiers that you had to leave for 3 days only and then you will be allowed to return to Phnom Penh? Response: They said that we had to leave for 3 days only in order to avoid the bombardment by the Americans. And I believed in what we were told because it could turn out to be true. And I was scared. So I left. Thank you. Due to the time limitation, this is my last question. During the time that you were en route from Phnom Penh to the provinces, while you were en route or at the location where you lived, did you or any other evacuees see any of the Khmer Rouge leaders who make an announcement at any location? Response: During the time that we were traveling from Phnom Penh to the road junction, the Khmer Rouge soldiers who walked in group did not speak to us. They only spoke to us when we were questioned by them. And then they would tell us whether we were allowed to proceed further. Through my observation, it seems that they separated themselves with into various groups, and I did not know how they classified us into various groups, but they only spoke to us when they questioned us. And while I was in the prison, they came to speak to me. That is while I was at the Sitapon prison. Question: Did you see any of the Khmer Rouge leaders, namely Nun Chia, Khieu Sampon, Ieng Sari, or Ieng Thiret during the time? Response: I never saw any of them. And those people who questioned me during the time that I was in prison, I did not know them. Thank you, Mr. Misaran. Indeed, thank you for responding to my question and my colleague's question. And I hope that your response would contribute to ascertaining the truth. And I wish you all the best and bon voyage. And thank you, Mr. President. President, thank you. The floor is now given to Nun Chia's defense. Correction, since the judges of the bench have some questions to put to the civil party, Judge Lavange, you may proceed.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I will have a very short question. Mr. Miasaran, I would like to speak to you as a nurse, and I'd like you to tell me a little bit about the condition the population was in Phnom Penh on 17 April 1975. What can you tell us about this? Were the people vulnerable, or were they made more fragile because of the situation? Were there a lot of refugees, for example?
Est-ce qu'il y avait
Were there any risks of disease?
In Phnom Penh, during the last few days, more and more people came into the city, and there were also more wounded people who were being admitted to the Buraikila hospital. Your Honor, could you repeat the last part of your question, please?
Yes, I was asking you if the population was facing a risk of diseases, such as cholera, for example.
At that time, no. I was at Boraikela compound, and we only received the wounded people. However, there was no epidemic disease at the time.
Now, in terms of medical care, did you feel that you were lacking supplies or lacking medicine to address the needs of the population?
At my section, there were insufficient tools and materials to respond to the treatment of the wounded. I tried to locate the bandages for the wounded, but we did not have sufficient bandages, so there was insufficient material for the treatment of the wounded.
Excusez-moi.
And a final question that may seem naive to you, but from your standpoint, from what you yourself witnessed, did the evacuation from Phnom Penh improve the situation, which was a situation characterized by shortages and privations, or did it make it worse?
Response. Your Honours, we left on the 17th of April. Everyone had to leave the capital, and I had to leave on National Road number 1. I did not know to which direction other people would be leaving the city. The situation was difficult because there were too many people and the food were scarce. And the movement was not good, so everything was in much difficulties.
Let's turn to the refugees. You said just now that there were more and more refugees coming into Phnom Penh in the days before the 17th of April. How were these people treated? Were they cordoned off into certain areas? Were there detention camps, even concentration camps for them? Did you hear any talk of measures of that nature?
Response. I am afraid I do not quite understand the question. However, I may respond that when the people had been coming to the city, we could see that the capital city was so much crowded and life was not easy. The state tried to create a place like the place I worked. They improvised the hospital ground, for example, making use of the Borai Kaila for treating wounded people, and a lot more people kept coming to the city.
Yes, really. What I was asking was if you knew if any of these refugees had been put in special places where they would be detained.
Response. No such thing happened. No one was said that they would be detained somewhere.
Last question now. I want to talk about the food supplies. What can you tell us about the food situation in Phnom Penh? Were there already shortages? And if so, what were the effects on the population? Did everybody more or less have enough to eat? What were the circumstances?
Response. During the last few days in Phnom Penh, food stuff were very expensive. It was getting more and more difficult to access to these foods, rice. And since more and more people kept coming to the city, the food supply was less, and the price increased, and accessibility to these foods was more difficult.
In Phnom Penh or outside the city, when you were going through that evacuation experience, did you see any kind of organization set up to feed people, feed these evacuees?
Response. Since I had left the Moniwong bridge, I did not notice any Khmer Rouge soldier offer me anything. Even when I reached my hometown, no one would come to assist us.
Je vous remercie beaucoup.
Thank you very much, sir, for all of those answers. I don't have anything else I wish to ask you.
The President, thank you, Judge Lavian. We would like to hand over to counsels for Mr. Noon Chia to put questions to the civil party if they would wish to do so.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Mr. Civil Party, Mr. Neasuran. I'm one of the lawyers for Noon Chia, and I do have some questions for you today. I shouldn't take too long. I certainly, just to give everyone an idea, I won't finish before the lunch break. So just let me start, if I may, Mr. Civil Party, by giving you a sort of a roadmap of the questions, the areas I'd like to cover today. First of all, I'd like to discuss partially what you've just been discussing with Judge Laverne and certainly some of the things you've said to the other parties, the state of Phnom Penh prior to the takeover by the Khmer Rouge. Secondly, I'd like to discuss briefly what you've talked about in terms of the justification offered for the evacuation. And then finally, I have some miscellaneous matters. So let me get started. And just to briefly recapitulate what you've said already, so I have everything clearly in my mind. You attended medical school in Phnom Penh from 1969 until 1972. Is that correct?
Response, yes it is.
Thank you. And incidentally, where did you live prior to 1969?
Response, I was born in Svay Rieng province and I studied medicine in Phnom Penh. Before 1969, I came from Svay Rieng to stay in Phnom Penh near the Moha Muntrai Pagoda.
Thank you, Mr. Witness, or Mr. Civil Party, excuse me, and I apologize if this has been asked already, but I just want to clarify. So then, when did you first arrive in the city of Phnom Penh, if you remember?
Response, I first arrived in Phnom Penh when I started medicine at medical school. It was early 1969 when I started the medical sessions. Indeed, I came to Phnom Penh only after I passed the high school exam, and it was early 1969.
Very good, thank you very much. And then, after you completed medical school, tell me if I have you correctly, from 1972 until 1973, you worked at the Priya Ket Milia Hospital in Phnom Penh.
Response, yes, it is correct.
Thank you very much. And then in 1963, if I have you correctly, you joined the military and you were assigned to Sisapon for approximately 18 months. Is that correct?
Response, it was not in 1963, it was in 1973. If so, it is correct. Indeed, I was there as a soldier. It's an obligation, and I had been in the army for 18 months.
Thank you, Mr. Civil Party. That's indeed what I meant, 1973. I apologize if I misspoke. And then, after that stage in the military, you returned to Phnom Penh. Is that correct? In late 1974?
Response, yes, it is.
Thank you. And again, one last bit to confirm. You remained in Phnom Penh from late 1974 until April 1975, working as a medic, as a sort of a triage medic, I think you described it, at Borikela.
Response, yes, it is clear and correct.
Thank you, Mr. Civil Party. So would you agree with me? Is it fair to say that barring those 18 months that you were at Sisupon, except for those 18 months, you personally observed and experienced firsthand the living conditions in Phnom Penh, in the city of Phnom Penh, up until April 1975?
Response. Can you please repeat that question?
I'm sorry, Mr. Civil Party, I will repeat the question. Is it fair to say that from 1969 until April 1975, barring the 18 months, except for the 18 months that you spent in Sisupon, you yourself personally experienced and observed the living conditions in Phnom Penh firsthand?
Response. I came to Phnom Penh by early 1969 when I attended the medical school, and I noted the living condition in Phnom Penh until the time when I approached Sisupon. So during this interval, I already witnessed what had happened during those days.
Thank you, Mr. Civil Party. Now, I'd like to move to some specific questions about those conditions and about your own personal experience of them, and I'm going to limit myself to Phnom Penh, to your time in Phnom Penh. I'm not going to ask you any questions about your time in Sisupon. Just picking up on a line of questioning that was begun by Judge Lavergne, based on your experience, based on your own personal experience, would you agree that the civil war that raged in Phnom Penh between the Lon Nol regime and the Khmer Rouge from approximately 1970 to 1975, would you agree that that civil war, along with the previous U.S. bombing campaign, had a negative impact on the amount of food, in particular rice, that Cambodia was capable of cultivating in the early 70s? In other words, were the food shortages that you briefly discussed with Judge Lavergne, were they partially, in some way, in any way, associated with the Civil War and or the American bombing of Cambodia, to your knowledge?
Response. Mr. President, the question is rather long, and I am afraid I cannot respond to that long piece. Can you rephrase it to a shorter version?
I will indeed. I apologize. It was quite long and a bit convoluted, I admit. You spoke earlier with Judge Lavergne about food shortages in Phnom Penh. Is it your experience, based on what you observed and experienced in Cambodia, that those food shortages may have been the result of the Civil War, the Lon Nol regime's civil war with the Khmer Rouge, and or the previous bombing of the country by the United States of America? Did those two events, in other words, have any impact, a negative one in particular, on the food situation in Cambodia? Hold on, Mr. Civil Party.
The President, Civil Party, could you please hold on, and Co-Prosecutor, you may now proceed.
Merci, je serai très bref.
Very briefly, Mr. President, it seems as if it's a very long question, going from 1969 to 1975. The Civil Party talked about shortages in the days prior to the 17th of April 1975 and was saying that the prices had gone up and it was difficult to buy rice. It seems that there is some way of being a little bit more precise in the time scale, the time frame that is concerned by this question.
I will certainly take my colleague's suggestion. Let me break it up for you then. You did discuss already food shortages immediately. Oh, sorry, are you not getting it, Mr. Civil Party?
No translation. I heard you speaking English.
No translation.
The President, there was no Khmer rendition.
Let me try again. I'm waiting.
The President, Judge Cartwright, you may now proceed.
Thank you, President. Just a very brief comment to Council. Your questions are being asked too fast and are far too complicated for the translation to be useful for the Civil Party.
Thank you, Judge Cartwright. I'll take note of that. And as I was saying, I agree with what my colleague just said, so I will break up the question. Mr. Civil Party, you discussed certain food shortages, a serious increase in the price of food, I believe you said, immediately prior to the Khmer Rouge takeover of Phnom Penh. Based on your own experience, let's say prior to the time you went to Sisapon, so let's say from 1972 until 1973, were there any food shortages at that time that you noticed?
Response. Mr. President, indeed the current question is easier to respond. When I was attending school in Phnom Penh, I noted that foods were still available. There were no shortages of food, but the price of the food increased each day, and each day it became more and more difficult to get more food.
Indeed. Thank you, Mr. Civil Party. So just so I have that clearly in my mind, prior to your time in Sisapon, you noticed steep increases in the price of food in Phnom Penh.
Response. Yes, it is correct to say that life was difficult. I do not say that there were no foods, but it became more difficult to access to the foods because more people kept coming to the city. So the number of people outnumbered the quantity of food available at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Civil Party. And I will endeavor to keep my questions short and more to the point. Keeping with that theme, keeping with that particular theme, and again picking up on a discussion you've already had with Judge Laverne, you did mention last week in your testimony an influx of people into Phnom Penh. A lot of refugees came to Phnom Penh, I believe you said, and that's what you discussed with Judge Laverne. Could you elaborate on that a bit? Why were refugees coming into Phnom Penh? Why were so many refugees coming into Phnom Penh?
Response. Khmer Rouge forces were approaching Phnom Penh, so people who were living at the outskirts of Phnom Penh had to take refuge in the capital city. And my school is close to the pagoda. The pagoda was full of refugees and monks. So for that, I could say more and more people kept coming to the city. There was a great influx of people to the capital city when the Khmer Rouge forces kept pushing closer to the vicinity of the city. So the city was full of population, and each house had to accommodate more newcomers. For example, my wife's house had to accommodate 6 to 7 families.
Thank you, Mr. Civil Party. And is there any way you could describe a little bit more the magnitude, that is, the size of that influx? You've just described it in great detail. Let me try and put it this way. Would you agree, as some have said, that the population of the city by April 1975 had more than doubled? Are you able to make that assessment?
Response. I agree with the account. Indeed, the population of Phnom Penh had more than doubled because people in the city had to receive newcomers. The President, we happen to have experienced some technical glitch because we didn't hear the sound properly. The President, Mr. Misaran, you may repeat what you just responded because it was most likely that your message did not get through. Response. Thank you, Mr. President. My apologies. I was saying that I agree with the account that the population of Phnom Penh had more than doubled. Perhaps more than that, even triple, because I could see that at each home in the city, we could see more members. Like at the home of my wife, we had to receive 6 to 7 families. And also, I noted that at Moha Muntray Pagoda, the pagoda complex was filled with people. So I could say that the statistic is even more than what you stated. Even it's not double but triple.
Thank you, Mr. Civil Party. Now turning a bit closer to your own area of expertise, that is the healthcare area. And again, just picking up on some lines of questioning that have been begun already. Is it fair to say that prior to your departure to Sisupon, that is by 1973, the city was already facing serious healthcare problems in terms of availability of supplies at the hospitals and things like that?
Response. Before I left Phnom Penh for Sisupon, and allow me to go back a little bit to the time when I left school. It was 1972 when I graduated and worked at Braketo Melia Hospital. At that time, the medicine was no short of supply, and we did not have any difficulties finding any medicine. So I can say that it is fair to say that medicine was adequate, but the food was more expensive.
Thank you, Mr. Civil Party. what about the housing situation in Phnom Penh around that same time, when the refugees had started to come into the city? Where were these people living?
Response. At each pagoda, there were a lot of people. Mohamundrai Pagoda, which located near my home, was a site where I could see a lot of people there. And I can also recall having noted that a lot of families members have had to take refuge in a small home. So I can say that there were a lot of people coming to share the same house at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Civil Party. And is it fair to say that by April 1975, many people in Phnom Penh were without housing, without work, and completely dependent on outside assistance or assistance from other people like pagodas, friends, family, things like that? Hold on, there's an objection.
President, Civil Party, could you please hold on? And International Co-Prosecutor, you may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. So far, I haven't heard many questions from the Nunchia defense that began with anything other than, is it fair to say that? It seems to me that this could be considered as somewhat suggestive. So if that first part of the question could be removed, and if open questions could be put to the civil party, we don't intend to oppose them, but it is this wording that is used every single time that does appear somewhat suggestive. Thank you, or perhaps leading.
Well, I would just say very briefly that the witness has, the civil party has shown his ability, and indeed he's done it, has shown his ability to agree or disagree with whatever proposition I've been putting to the civil party. Now, it is obviously imperative that the defense be permitted to put its case through its questioning, and I think that this kind of questioning has been allowed for some time in this courtroom, and that we've moved away from these kinds of objections. There's absolutely nothing wrong in my submission with putting a proposition to a witness or a civil party that is a part of the defense case and asking whether or not the witness or the civil party agrees, disagrees, partially agrees, what have you, with that assessment. So I think it's a perfectly acceptable technique. The witness is obviously an intelligent individual. He's capable of dealing with these kinds of questions, as he has proved this morning.
The President, the observation made by the International Co-Prosecutor concerning the line of questioning by Nunchia Council is appropriate. Counsel for Nunchia is now instructed not to put leading questions, and Counsel is also advised not to solicit responses from the civil party that is rather speculative, and the chamber wishes to again advise counsel to refrain from putting those questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I could just ask for a brief clarification so that I may perhaps reformulate some of my questions after lunch. Are you saying that the defense is not allowed, not permitted to put key portions of our case, which have long been part of the case file, which were raised as early as 2008, are you saying that we're not allowed to put aspects of our case to civil parties and witnesses, and that we must always ask open-ended questions? Because I think anyone who's been observing these proceedings over this last year will see that the defense has been given this leeway in the past. This is how the defense puts its case. This is how defense asks questions of witnesses and civil parties. This leading, non-leading distinction, I was under the impression that that has rightly been dispensed with ages ago. There is no prohibition on leading questions in any civil law system in the world. And certainly in common law systems, leading questions are a key tool in a defense arsenal. So, again, I need some clarification and preferably some legal support. What exactly are you telling me? Please.
The President, exactly. Here we are applying the civil law tradition. And secondly, questions that are leading in nature are prohibited. Parties to the proceedings are not allowed to pose any of these questions from the very beginning. Thirdly, questions that are posed by parties in which parties are making their own conclusion or speculation and soliciting such consistent responses from the civil parties or witnesses are banned, and they are not allowed indeed in the civil law tradition. And we also are guided by the agreement, and also the internal rules, so that the application of the laws are consistent with what already stated in such rules and agreement.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for that, Mr. President. I understand what you've just said. In response to that, perhaps I could make a very brief request. I would ask that perhaps over the lunch break, this chamber could produce evidence that there exists a single civil law jurisdiction in the entire world that prohibits leading questions. And I would like to see that jurisprudence, because I don't think it exists. Leading questions are, to use an expression my friend Mr. Carnavas is fond of, part and parcel of witness examination. It's how questions are asked. Judge Laverne asks leading questions, the prosecution asks leading questions all the time. Everyone on this side of the stage, from time...
Look.
The President, the decision has already been made, and questions that are leadings are not allowed in the context of these proceedings. And we have done so from the very beginning. Parties who take issues with the line of questioning that are leading in nature always have their objections sustained, and the chamber will maintain this position all along. As long as parties have good ground to oppose any questions that are leading, then the chamber will rule such objection sustained. and we have conducted the hearings from the beginning until today. It has already been a year in the proceedings, and we hope such issue should not have happened at this time. It should have happened at the very beginning or early days during the proceedings, where the chamber would take the opportunity to have them addressed properly. We thank you, the civil party, very much. Since it is now appropriate time for lunch adjournment, the chamber will adjourn until 1:30 p.m. Court officer is now instructed to assist the civil party during the adjournment and have him return to the courtroom when the next session resumes. Security personnel are now instructed to bring Mr. Kyusampon back to his holding cell and have him return to the courtroom before the next session resumes. The court is adjourned.
សូមអញ្ជើញក្រោកឈរ